John Stuart Mill argued that happiness is the only thing that's good, and that unhappiness is the only thing that's bad. From this, he argued that morality is concerned with maximizing what is good, happiness, and minimizing what is bad, unhappiness. Robert Nozick argues that the assumption that happiness is the only good is false. People value things other than happiness and are willing to sacrifice happiness to get them. Consequently, maximizing happiness does not always do the most good. In this presentation, I want to take a look at Nozick's argument. Before we look at Nozick's argument, let me take a look at the thesis Mill was defending so that we can understand Nozick in context. The conclusion that Mill is seeking to defend goes as follows. The utilitarian doctrine is that happiness is desirable and the only thing desirable as an end. Everything else is valuable only as a means to happiness. Mill's argument in defense of this thesis goes like this. One starts by arguing that happiness is an end. On this matter, Mill says the following, quote, "The only proof capable of being given that an object is visible is that people actually see it. The only proof that a sound is audible is that people hear it. And so of the other sources of our experience. In like manner, I apprehend the sole evidence it is possible to produce that anything is desirable is that people do actually desire it." End quote. And it seems quite true that people do desire happiness. But to prove that happiness is the sole end, Mill also has to prove that people value nothing else. Mill writes, quote, "But it has not by this alone proved itself to be the sole criterion. To do that, it would seem, by the same rule, necessary to show not only that people desire happiness, but that they never desire anything else." End quote. He then goes from here to argue that all other things are valued as a part of happiness. We are made happy by having them, and unhappy by not having them. So Mill's position is that happiness is something that we desire for its own sake, and is, in fact, the only thing that we desire for its own sake. Here's where Nozick's argument comes in. Nozick aims to show that it's not true that the only things we desire are the parts of happiness. Let me first present the argument, then I'll go over each part in more detail. Nozick's argument takes the following form. Premise 1. Assume that Mill's thesis, the thesis that the only thing that provides value is happiness, is true. Premise 2. If this is true, then people would prefer an experience machine that provides greater happiness over a reality that provides lesser happiness. Premise 3. However, it is not the case that people prefer an experience machine that provides greater happiness over a reality that provides lesser happiness. And so we have the conclusion, therefore the assumption, Mill's thesis that happiness is the only thing that has value, is false. First, I want to look at the validity of the argument, the way the pieces fit together to support the conclusion. Here's an analogy that shows how the reasoning works in a clearer case. Imagine that you are a police detective. Your partner suggests that suspect 1 committed the murder. You reason as follows. Step 1. Assume that it's true that suspect 1 committed the murder. Step 2. If suspect 1 committed the murder, then suspect 1 had to have been in Denver on April 12th when the murder took place. Step 3. However, we have irrefutable evidence that suspect 1 was in New York giving a presentation in front of an audience of several hundred people on April 12th. And from this, we get the conclusion that the assumption that suspect 1 committed the murder has to be false. Nozick wants to use the same type of reasoning used to prove that suspect 1 did not commit the murder to show that happiness is not the only value. So Nozick begins by assuming that Mill's thesis is correct for the sake of argument. But he will show that this leads to a false conclusion, which means we will ultimately have to reject this assumption. To construct his argument against Mill, Nozick invents an experience machine. This is a machine that gives you the experiences that would make you happy, without any way for you to know that they are mere experiences. As Nozick wrote, quote, "Super-duper neuropsychologists could stimulate your brain so that you would think and feel you were writing a great novel or making a friend or reading an interesting book," unquote. If it is true that people only care about happiness and nothing else, then people will prefer an experience machine that provides greater happiness over a reality that provides lesser happiness. More happiness means more value on the utilitarian account. However, when asked, people do not prefer the greater happiness of the experience machine over the lesser happiness of reality. And reality is filled with frustrations and failures and unpleasant surprises. Maybe it's the chance of failure that makes life exciting. But we can program the experience machine to give people exactly the optimum amount of failure that would produce the most happiness. Life's failures often deviate from the optimum amount and type that would provide with maximum overall life enjoyment. The experience machine never will. We can't explain the choice people make, their rejection of the experience machine, in terms of seeking the most happiness. This suggests that people want things other than happiness, things for the sake of which they are even willing to sacrifice some happiness. They value things like actually writing a great novel that actual people like to read. They value having actual friends and actually teaching people about Nozick's experience machine and its implications for John Stuart Mill's utilitarianism. So it can't be the case that happiness is the only thing desired as an end. People seem to desire actual experiences, even if actual experiences produce less happiness than fake experiences. Okay, does this argument destroy Mill's utilitarianism? Well, not really. Mill could modify his theory so that it includes the fulfillment of these other desires with the concept of utility. If people want to have real friends, raise real children, write real novels, and reduce real suffering, then these are simply to be included in the utilitarian calculation regarding the value of motives and projects. It would still be the case that the projects worth pursuing are those that contribute to the fulfillment and prevent the thwarting of other projects. And projects that thwart other projects, regardless of whose they are, would count as bad. I'd have to say that I agree with Nozick's assessment that, quote, plugging into the machine is a kind of suicide, end quote. I enjoy some make-believe. I enjoy playing a character in a game performing fictitious heroics as a diversion. These videos would hold no value if I were only building them for non-player characters in a computer simulation. This objection provides reasons to question a corner of Mill's utilitarian theory. However, the rest can be redesigned to handle it, so it's not fatal.